Thank you very much. Well, let's talk now about the Nicola Sturgeon suggestion that the Scots could veto that decision, the historic decision to leave the European Union. I'm joined now by the barrister Jolyon Maugham, who's blogged that Holyrood doesn't have powers to block Brexit. So let's just clear this. Legally they don't.
Well, that's the view that I took. I've read the comments of Sir David Edwards, who's a former judge in the Court of Justice in Europe, that gave rise to this idea. He was giving evidence to the House of Lords Select Committee on the European Community, and he said it seemed almost off the cuff that Scotland would have power to block Brexit. But I looked at the point in some detail last night, and in abnormal circumstances, and frankly one can't think of many circumstances more abnormal than this, the Westminster Parliament retains an overriding right to act contrary to the wishes of the Scottish Parliament, even on devolved matters. So my view, I'm afraid, is that Sir David Edwards has got it wrong. The real question is whether Ms. Sturgeon is treating this as a political exercise or a legal exercise, and we'll know about that.
Well, she can't do the first if she hasn't got the powers of the second.
Well, I'm not sure I agree. A lot of politicians say they've got decent legal arguments in order to score political points without actually following through. If she is serious about this, then you would expect the Scottish Parliament to be coming down to the High Court in London in order to seek a declaration or prospectively even an injunction against Article 50 proceedings being started.
And they could do that?
Well, these are very rare events. One branch of the United Kingdom suing another branch, and I can't say that I've looked in detail at the mechanic by which it would be done, but my expectation would be that it would be by way of an application in the High Court in London.
Could she go to the European Court?
No, because it's a matter of domestic law. It's a matter of construction of the Scotland Act 1998. A question, sadly, upon which the European Court of Justice has no jurisdiction.
Jolyon, we're going to leave it there. Jolyon Maugham, thank you very much for that.
Great pleasure.
Because I want to talk to Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Conservative leader, who joins me now. I don't know, would you have supported Nicola Sturgeon if she had suggested, or if she wanted to do that and to try to veto the decision, the Democrat decision taken earlier this week?
Well, I'm not a constitutional lawyer like your previous guest, Jolyon Maugham. I have, however, taken advice from one of my own team who is. The advice that I've taken suggests that this actually is not within the power of Holyrood. There will be a statement from the First Minister on Tuesday within the Parliament, and I look forward to her clarifying what, if any, legal advice she has taken to that effect. As I understand it, and as the advice has been given, and with the advice that you've just heard from your previous commentator and contributor, it would appear that she may either have been misinterpreted this morning or may have slightly overreached herself this morning in terms of what is within the legal bounds of Holyrood.
Now, today, of course, we here have been concentrating on the developments within the Labour Party. If I could look at what's happening in your party, the Conservative Party needs to find a new Prime Minister. Now, how do you suggest that process should go?
Well, I believe that it is important that we, move to a state where we have nominees coming forward, that they're whittled down to two, as within the rules of our constitution within the party, and that's taken to members, and we get somebody installed in the sort of time frame that the Prime Minister outlined on Friday. I think that would be in everybody's best interest to make sure that we saw that continuity and passover happen as smoothly as possible.
Would you stand?
There is no mechanism for me to stand in terms of I'm not an MP. I do not seek to be an MP. I've got a big job here as the leader of the opposition in Scotland. And I think particularly when there is an issue regarding one of the very first things the First Minister said on Friday morning, within hours of the last vote being counted, that she announced to the world that one of her first acts had been to instruct Scottish Government staff to start and officials to start drawing up a second indie ref legislation. I think the job I've got here is going to be an incredibly important one for keeping our country together, because let's not forget that in terms of unions, the United Kingdom is a far bigger market for trade and resource to Scotland than the EU has been. It's more than 4 times the size and value of market than the EU has been. So I think I've got a pretty big job in my hands up here. Thank you very much.
It's not a foregone conclusion that Nicola Sturgeon will act sooner rather than later in terms of another independence referendum. Is there any doubt in your mind that she will at some point call for one?
Well, I think there's a lot of people in Scotland right now who are being very worried and disconcerted by these events. As you know, I campaigned vigorously on the other side. I was disappointed with the result. But I think what's important going forward is that we get the best trade deal for the UK, and I'll support the Scottish Government's part of being involved in that trade deal with the UK Government and other devolved legislations to make sure we get the best deal going forward. Now, there's lots and lots of unanswered questions. We don't know what's on the table, what course is the best for us to chart yet. And that's why I think it is so deeply disappointing that before we found out any of those answers, the very first announcement the First Minister made was to say that she'd got officials working on a second independence referendum. And now, you know, we haven't moved Article 50 yet. We know there's 2 years even after it is moved. I do think that was slightly premature and added extra uncertainty on what is already an uncertain time.
How would you assess the mood in Scotland this afternoon?
Well, I think there's a lot of people in Scotland who are very worried. You know, they've seen what's happened in the last 48 hours. There's many people who are disappointed because they voted in the other way. But, you know, let's also not forget that over 1 million people voted to leave the EU from Scotland, around the same number that voted for the SNP government just 4 weeks ago. So it wasn't an inconsiderable amount. And I think there's a real wish now within Scotland that we start getting the answers to the very many questions that this result has thrown up, that we start plotting out the course that's best for our country Scotland, and our country, the UK, and then we start getting the trade deal that will secure the businesses and investment in Scotland that so many people's jobs rely on.
Finally, if you're not in a position able to stand south of the border, who do you think, who would you back as the next Tory leader and obviously Prime Minister?
Well, I'm in an almost unique position in that as one of the party's leaders. You know, I'm not an MP. My signature won't be sought for a nomination. I think it's incumbent upon me, my duty and my role as a leader within the party to assess all of the nominees as they come forward, to assess all of the platforms that they stand on and the contribution that they can make. And I have to wait until everybody comes forward to assess them on their merits, and then I'll give my answer to that. But, you know, I think it would be premature of me to start backing horses in this race before we see, you know, who's coming forward and on what platform they stand. The one thing I would say, though, is that I believe it's incumbent upon us as a party, because we're electing not just a nominee that we take to the country, but because we're electing a Prime Minister, I think it is incumbent upon all of us within the Conservative Party to elect somebody who can help bring this country together, because the division is pretty big. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm saying it has to be a Remainer or a Leaver, but it has to be somebody who has the personality, the ability, and the strength going forward in terms of the negotiation that we need, somebody that can really do a job for Britain. So that's what I'm going to be looking for when the nominees come forward.
Ruth Davidson, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
I'm going to take you back to Anita now. Let's get more on that breaking news.